Then we will call this meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. Staff, would you call roll?
Yes. Matt Doublestein,
Present.
Andrew McGee,
Here.
Sarah Ford,
Here.
Lauren Foley,
Here.
Danny Powers,
Here.
Dave Taylor, and Steve Milstead.
Here.
Thank you. Anyone have a motion on approval of the agenda?
Matt, we need to do the appointment of officers.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right, you did. I do see that on there. Is there anyone that would like to serve as an officer? Or shall we, I will be happy to continue in this role.
I'll make a motion to nominate Matt Doublestein as president.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
All right. Matt Doublestein,
Abstain?
Andrew McGee,
Yes.
Sarah Ford,
Yes.
Lauren Foley,
Yes.
Danny Powers,
Yes.
and Steve Milstead.
Yes.
Thank you. And our current vice president, do you wish to continue?
I will.
I'll move to nominate Andrew McGee as vice president.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Matt Doublestein,
Aye.
Andrew,
I'll abstain.
Sarah Ford,
Yes.
Lauren Foley,
Yes.
Danny Powers,
Yes.
Steve Milstead.
Yes.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everyone. All right, now we're ready for that motion on the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second.
All right. Matt Doublestein,
Aye.
Andrew McGee,
Aye.
Sarah Ford,
Aye.
Lauren Foley,
Aye.
Danny Powers,
Aye.
Steve Milstead.
Aye.
Agenda is approved. Thank you. Moving on then to item 3, public request to speak. Do we have any requests to speak on non-agenda items?
I have not received any.
I've received no comments.
All right. Seeing no presentations or unfinished business, we move on to new business then.
Do we need to make a motion for the minutes?
I'm sorry, guys. Yes, we did. I missed that after agenda. My apologies. Anybody want to go back to that officers vote? Let's, jeez, okay. Andrew, is that your motion? Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, yes.
All right.
Second.
Motion and second on the minutes.
Matt Doublestein,
Aye.
Andrew McGee,
Aye.
Sarah Ford,
Aye.
Lauren Foley,
Aye.
Danny Powers,
Aye.
Steve Milstead.
Aye.
Thank you. And you know, thanks to staff for putting together these agendas too. They are nice. In this venue, back and forth between all the tabs can be a little bit of a thing. I'll apologize for that. All right, so now we're ready for that new business then. Docket PC 20-054ZA, the Hockett-Starkey Zone Amendment. Is the petitioner ready? Do you have a presentation?
Yes.
There we go.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Jacob. I'm here firm attorney with Hackman Hewlett, located at 1620 West Oak Street in Zionsville. And joining me is Terry McCardwell, who is the CEO of GDI Companies, as well as Mike Sheik, who is the Director of Business Development. Before you this evening is a rezone request, and we are seeking the Plan Commission's favorable recommendation to, in a combination of 2 parcels, generally located on the west side of town, off of 300 South. And specifically, they're more commonly known as the Hockett Ground. We've got about 80 acres that's a subject to the rezone petition, as well as the Starkey residence, which is just under 3 acres for a total of 82.5 acres. The site is, or the acreage, we are currently, or our request is to take the undeveloped agricultural ground as well as the Starkey residence to a light industrial or industry I-1 from its current agricultural classification. So I wanted to talk a little bit this evening at the outset about how we got here and what this request is not. And I think there's been a little bit of confusion about our filing. We were last before you with a substantially larger rezone request that included the Peabody ground to the east of us. And that involved a nationally recognized user that the state was involved in trying to attract that user to Indiana. And that request has been withdrawn, and our petition does not include any of the Peabody ground. There was an earlier version of the staff report that the first page incorrectly identified the Peabody ground as the subject to our rezone request. And I think staff are quickly correcting that, and that is the Hockett piece, and Starkey piece is due west of that. And I don't know if it's possible for staff to share my screen or not.
Yes, we can. Hold on one second. You should be able to share now.
Okay. And what I've done is I don't know if does that come up? Here we go. Okay, so just to give everybody some reference, our previous rezone request included the area in black with the X through it. That's commonly known as the part of the Peabody ground. And that is not a subject of our rezone request this evening, but the area outlined in red is what we're talking about this evening. You see the 80 acres and the almost 3 acres. So as we're, and to look at a little bit more closely, bear with me. Okay, there's a little closer view of it since there was some confusion in the staff report. The only correction that then impacts in the staff report from the initial tendering of the report is the zoning classifications on page 1 of the staff report. So our proposed project encompasses 2 proposed warehouses, one of about 770,000 square feet and the other just under 500,000 square feet. If we look at the area, the Starkey piece, just as an additional note, is the subject of a pending annexation petition. The north of the subject property, or properties, excuse me, is occupied residential. And that is in part controlled by Boone County. The remainder is in Whitestown's jurisdiction. The west is undeveloped agricultural as well as general business. The east, and this is the correction to the staff report, is undeveloped agricultural area. And then to the south, we do have a small section of agricultural, but the rest is been rezoned, mainly light industry. And that has also been developed by GDI. So if we look at the nuts and bolts of a rezoning petition, as you are all well aware, there are 5 criteria that govern your decision. And the first of those criteria, and I'd like to look at the first 2, are the comp plan and the current conditions of the surrounding area and the subject ground. As you were aware, your comprehensive plan was updated in 2015. And I think if you talk to those involved that were that helped draft that plan and bring it to fruition, there was about 2 years of meetings that that encompassed the formation of that document, and was drafted during a time of more limited growth than what we are seeing now. And frankly, that document does not reflect where we are today and what's happened in the area. Whitestown, as we're all well aware, has been one of the fastest growing communities in the Midwest. And I think our town leaders should be commended on seizing some opportunities when they've been presented. We believe this to be one of those. Frankly, the town of Whitestown has outgrown its comprehensive plan, and that's no one's fault, but that's just a fact when you have that much time pass and this much happen in a community. And it's also not uncommon for communities with agricultural ground near an interstate. So if we look at the current conditions in the area, since the comp plan has been adopted, there's been additional parts of this property that have and will be annexed into the town. There is a bridge on Albert S. White, significant development just south of us and north of 400 South. And again, that's been a lot of GDI construction. And in short, I think specifically for this area, I would argue that we've outgrown the comp plan's guidance that it can provide as the area has simply changed. So we believe that if we're looking at the comp plan, that really that is outweighed by the current character and nature and uses of what's happened in the with development in the area. Looking at the third criteria, the most desirable use, I would argue that this is exactly what GDI's plan is. And while it's difficult to change the uses of land, I encourage you to look at growth and development to the south. I believe that's been extremely positive for the town of Whitestown and its residents, much of which GDI had a hand in. I would submit to you that GDI is a top flight developer, and they have brought very positive results with their projects for the town, to and including some nationally recognized users. If we look at and analyze our thoroughfare plan, we see that it has and will or has been designed and can support the proposed project. There are utilities in the area to sufficiently serve a project of this nature, and we believe all point towards this kind of use. The fourth criteria, I'm going to have Terry McCardwell weigh in on a little bit, but the fourth criteria that you look at is conservation of property values. And this proposed project will significantly increase the valuation of the subject parcels. I would ask you to unmute Mr. McCardwell, and he's going to address that issue.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you all for allowing us to be here tonight and present. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Terry McCardwell. I'm one of the owners of GDI Companies. We're a developer and contractor. And our first entree into the town of Whitestown was with the Fishback Creek Business Park, which was just to the south of this on the south side of the creek. And the Fishback Business Park, we developed in probably a 4 or 5 year period. We developed approximately 2.5 million square feet of space with an assessed value for real property of $100 million approximately. And additionally, there's probably another $30 to $50 million of personal property that will be associated with those developments. Some of the corporate occupiers that we've brought to Whitestown include most recently Coca-Cola Bottling Company, DHL, which is one of the largest packaging and freight companies in the world. Zoetis Pharmaceutical, Life Science Logistics is now occupying the building. And also another yet new user I'm not at liberty to name, but will be a Fortune 50 type company. So we really feel like we've tried to do a great job of having responsible development and bringing in the type of occupiers and users and corporate citizens that would be accretive to the town of Whitestown. And we look forward to continuing that, hopefully, here on this 80-acre parcel.
So I think that covers the conservation of property value issue. Really, the last characteristic or requirement for you to look at is whether this promotes responsible development and growth. And that, I view this as sort of the catch-all and where the rubber meets the road for you all. It's all well and good to talk about the comprehensive plan and where we are in its maturation in application to the community, property values and tax benefits. But this is the one where you as Plan Commission members really earn your keep and evaluate whether this is a good opportunity for the town of Whitestown. And I would submit to you that it very much is. It's brought to you by a quality developer that has done terrific work within the town and has a good track record. So if we move beyond the statutes and look beyond those 5 criteria, if you look at this as a continuation of GDI's projects in the Fishback Creek development area, we think that we more than meet those 5 criteria and would ask for your statutory support in that regard. But as we're breaking this down, there's some points that I would like to just denote for everyone as we look outside the statute and as we have reached out and spoken to various property owners in the area about this project. And specifically, we have talked to property owners across the road, across 300 South, and they are residential property owners as well as some they own some vacant ground or agricultural ground. And some of the issues that we've discussed with those property owners involved concerns on drainage on their own properties. And GDI has talked with them, and if the project moves forward, they are more than willing to take some of the water across the street on 300 South into their project and into the drainage system for this proposed project. So in hopes to answer a concern that property owner would have. Additionally, we will work with that property owner when it comes, or those property owners when it comes to berming and landscaping and trying to minimize the visibility to their property, as well as some setback issues. And so we have also spoken to a business owner to the west, and that we are certainly committed to work with that property owner. They own the general business zoned property to the west. And we will certainly work with that property owner to customize some of the buffering and landscaping in the area to help mitigate concerns that they have. And just as another note, I know that these properties this property has been discussed for a variety of different uses. And, one of the things that we have done that I think is a benefit rather than a residential project is that we have steered our access point along 575, not onto 300 South. So in other words, if you had a large residential subdivision in that area, I think your traffic flow would significantly increase onto 300 South. So we've tried to avoid that and mitigate that concern in moving our access point further to the south.
Mr. Jacob, you've got about 30 seconds left in your time.
Fantastic. Well, our request this evening is that you pass this along to the town council with a favorable recommendation, and the members of GDI and I are happy to answer any questions beyond this.
Thank you. Staff, would you share your report, please?
Yes. The rezoning process is a legislative act. The Plan Commission will make a recommendation to the Town Council. Town Council will then make the final decision. Because this is a legislative act, Plan Commission can require commitments to be made as part of the rezoning process that run with the land. For this project, staff has given no favorable or unfavorable recommendation to the Commission.
Thank you. Now we move on to public discussion. Are there any requests to speak on this item?
I did receive one public request to speak from Cheryl Hancock. And then if we receive any others, they can message Jill and we can allow them after Cheryl.
Matt, before Cheryl speaks, I just wanted to note that Dave Taylor, who was not on during the time of our roll call, has now joined. And because he wasn't there at the time of the roll call, it's really up to the board as to whether or not he's going to vote and participate on, have a vote on the matter. But I just want to note that he has now joined. I'm not for sure what point during the presentation he joined, but he did recently join for the good of the record.
All right. How does in this environment, in a digital format, how do we make that determination about his participation? Do we need anything other than to acknowledge his presence?
The minutes would now note that he's there, and we just need a motion from a member of the board to allow him to vote since he wasn't here when the meeting began. And as long as the majority agrees with that, I would have no problem to him participating.
Okay. Perhaps before our comments, we should address that. Is there anyone on the board who would like to make a motion about Mr. Taylor's presence?
I'd make a motion to allow Dave Taylor to vote on this motion.
I'll second.
Having a motion and a second. Before a vote, we do have some room for discussion. Mr. Taylor, were you able to hear the presentation? Dave, are you there?
You should be unmuted now.
All right, Mr. Taylor, were you able to hear the presentation? Okay, if Dave wasn't able to hear it, I'm not sure that his participation.
I will withdraw my motion since can't hear Dave.
Okay, we move on to the public comment. Ms. Hancock.
Hi there, Council. Cheryl Hancock. I live at 5400 East, 300 South. I live directly in front of the Hockett-Starkey property. So this will greatly affect us either way you decide tonight. We have really went back and forth on what we would like to see happen to the property, whether it be per the comp plan or for the warehouse. My husband and myself, along with our neighbor Joe Davidson, who lives the property to the east of us, we have ourselves have about 2.5 acres, which is all the entire 2.5 acres is in front of the Hockett portion of this property. So we did meet with the developers yesterday. They did come out. We showed them pictures because the Hockett property, we have had issues with drainage with them over the years. We've sent them letters every year that the natural swell has disappeared, which has caused our properties to flood every year. One year we were not even able to walk off any portion of our porch on any side of our house. We pretty much was in an island because of the water that the Hockett property backloads onto our property. Like Mr. Jacobs said, the developers have committed to us that they would take care of the drainage issue, which would not only, help our property out, it would help out the neighbor to the east and to the house to the west of us, which is also directly affected. So I would definitely like to see that commitment put into, if you guys approve the rezone, that commitment be put in the paperwork. We have also already spoken to Ken Hedge, who is the county surveyor. He has been to our property numerous times over numerous years because of the drainage issue. We will already be involved in the drainage process regardless of what happens on that parcel across the street. We did talk to them about a berm. They have committed to a berm. I think the normal berm is a 6-foot berm. We would prefer a little bit higher than that because this building will only be about 100 feet from our house. So if you were looking at a warehouse, would you want one 100 feet in front of your house pretty much? I don't think you'd want a very short berm. So we would like a taller berm with bigger trees, pine trees like full size. This will not only help with the light issue, the aesthetics, and also the noise issue. So we would definitely like to see that in the commitments if you so choose. We would also like, and I don't know if this is possible, but we would prefer a commitment. This was something that came up after our meeting with the developer yesterday, but we would like to have some kind of a commitment to obviously no working and nothing going on in the building during quiet hours. Just because our house is going to be right next door to this building. Quiet hours, I think for the county are 10 p.m. and I think either 6 or 7 a.m. I'm not sure what the morning time is, but I do know the evening time is 10 p.m., which would mean no semis backing into the building at 10 o'clock at night. My husband works very early in the morning, so he is pretty much gone out of the house by 5 o'clock, so we go to bed early. So obviously a semi backing in to the docks would be very disruptive with our house sitting so close to the building. So some kind of a time commitment. I know during construction, those time commitments are already there. But also if we can find some kind of a commitment to like no overnight work or no traffic after 10 o'clock would be wonderful. Last two things, I know they talked about property values. I know we have spoken to two realtors who said our personal property would go down value-wise. Nobody obviously wants to live in front of a warehouse or a subdivision either way. And I do know, I did let the developers know, there is 2 houses directly across from the Starkey property that recently sold after this was pulled from your guys' agenda previously. They put their house on the market right away, sold right away, and have moved out. So the 2 new owners have not been notified of this development. Because I know as of this past week, the county still had the old owners' information on file. So I don't know how you guys want to address that, as they obviously bought a house not knowing there was going to be a warehouse or a subdivision or some kind of development in front of that. So that is also something to maybe kind of take into account. when you guys make your decisions tonight. But either way, we know development's going to happen. It's just what development goes there. But if you do decide on the warehouse, we would like those commitments put in writing, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that we have two others who requested to speak. Ken Newell. If you please share your name and address. Is Mr. Newell still on the call?
He should be unmuted, yes.
Okay, if you go ahead. Oh, looks like muted again.
I think he just muted himself. Hold on a second. Now he's unmuted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, hi.
There we go. All right, sorry, it was unmuting on my end, but didn't seem to be working. Anyway, my name is Ken Newell. I live at 609 West Pierce Street, also known as 300 South. I'd just like to note that I would counter Mr. Jacobs' point that the comprehensive plan is irrelevant. I think a lot of my fellow residents and I have really made our long-term plans in Whitestown based around the elements of that comprehensive plan. I do understand that from time to time there's going to be need for alterations and change, but I really feel that that buffer space next to the residences is critical. As Cheryl just addressed, property values definitely will go down. The last time this similar proposal was submitted, I put in some public comments that even document, you can see drastic price changes between the homes closer to the existing warehouses and where we're at now. I would also like to say that the notes about property values increasing, of course, is all relevant to just the subject parcel. The rest of us are not going to see anything but an eyesore, a source of noise, a source of traffic from this. So I'd totally prefer to see this developed as is in the plan for a different variety of residential and also commercial properties, but to try and avoid the industrial. If that can't be avoided, I would suggest a commitment from the developer that they will not pursue any further industrial projects to the east of this site.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Mike Caldwell.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity just to say a few words. I live in the property at 3160 South, 500 East. It's actually the only house left on the west side of 500 between 300 and 400. And while this development doesn't really butt up to my property, it's certainly within pretty close distance. And, with the development from Anson coming south and now this to our east, when we bought this property and tore the old house down and built a new house 6 or 7 years ago, this is the last thing that we expected. Not against growth or anything like that, but it just seems like it's coming in from all different directions. And, as Ken mentioned, I would, if it's going to be developed, I would much rather see houses than more warehouses. And, I travel through this area quite a bit. I walk around quite a bit and I see all these warehouses going in, and a lot of them are still vacant. And now we're talking about putting more in. So, I'm against this. But I also know that growth is going to happen. And I guess my only other question right now would be, if this does go through, where would the access points be to this property? Since it's really kind of cut in between 500 and 575, where would the access roads be to gain access to this property?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ask the petitioner to note those questions. Are there any others who've requested to speak?
I've received no other comments, no.
All right, then we'll close the public discussion and ask for closing remarks from the petitioner.
Yes, thank you. Just taking some of those in reverse order. Mr. Caldwell, the access to the property will be to the west, as I understand, consistent with our or from 500 or 575 is the current plan. So, and we understand your concern about growth from all directions. Whitestown, since the or around the time of the adoption of the comprehensive plan, has significantly grown and changed. There were a few other comments, Mr. Newell, in terms of any restricting any other projects that this particular developer would engage in and around the community. That's not something that I think is necessarily relevant to the request. I understand what you're saying, but not something that we could commit to. And Mr. Newell, additionally, I wouldn't suggest that the comprehensive plan is ever irrelevant, but what happens is that the character and nature of development that occur beyond the comprehensive plan or in addition to the comprehensive plan after its adoption, simply it matures out of it. And so while it's always a direction, I think what we need to really look at is that we've got general business in the area, we have light industry to the south, and you have a pretty good sized piece of undeveloped farm ground that we have proposed what we believe to be a very good project for the town to bring in. So relative to Ms. Hancock's comments, I believe that she had some comments about drainage and the berm and trees. And I would like to ask that Mr. McCardwell be unmuted to address some of those, since he was in some of those discussions directly with the Hancocks.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We did have a meeting, a good meeting yesterday with Cheryl and her husband, Mike, and Joe. And we did commit, as we understand it from talking with the Hancocks and Mr. Davidson, that a lot of their drainage is a result, their drainage problem is a result of the swale that's eroded on the south side of 300 through that farm field. There's a pipe that comes under the road, and we've agreed to connect that pipe to our drainage system in the park, which I think everybody believes should take care of that problem, or at least vastly improve it. So we have committed to that. We also talked about a berm. We're happy to berm the property along 300. We committed to a 6-foot berm with landscaping on top of it. And, we would continue to live by that. I think a 10-foot berm just becomes problematic from our standpoint, from a development standpoint of the property. So I hate to commit any more than that, but quite certainly with a berm, with a landscape, trees on top of it, preferably fir trees, that will go a long way to alleviating any noise, or at least minimizing noise and light issues that would take place.
So I believe that addresses many, if not all, of the comments from the remonstrators. Mr. McCardwell and I remain happy to answer any questions that the Plan Commission would have.
Thank you very much. And we'll close the public hearing. Are there any comments and discussion from the commission?
I'm sorry, I may have missed it. You said a 6-foot berm. Is that just on the north side of the property? Or did you say, I'm sorry if I missed that.
Yeah, just to orient you, yes, that would be correct. We would comply with the meet or exceed the town's landscaping and buffering requirements. However, the Hancock specifically wanted to see if they could customize that a little bit and wanted to see a minimum of 6-foot berm in that area, which is what we would commit to.
Is that also similar for the west side of the property too? The one, the general business?
Yeah. Yes, so the business to the west, owned by the Reinhardts, the GDI has been in discussions with them, and we would certainly, we have to be sort of reasonable in what kind of berming would be put in, and the discussions have been what size berm to put in and how to sort of customize some of the landscaping. We would do some sort of berming, whether it's the height and breadth that the Reinhardts would want. That remains to be seen, and those have been some of our ongoing discussions. But we would certainly consider putting a berm there with landscaping in and around it.
The couple of questions I had were answered. They were asked by citizens, and I guess from my standpoint, this is a tough one. I think that I agree that comprehensive plans need to be updated. This one's a few years old. I think there are times that it makes sense to move outside of the comprehensive plan if, based on where the property's at, the benefit to the residents, any number of, I'm not convinced that this is a time to do that. It is nothing against GDI. I know that you guys have done fabulous work, so it's got zero to do with that. It's got more to do with a piece of property that is an entrance into the town that is on the comprehensive plan as residential. I am glad Cheryl mentioned the drainage issues. I didn't know about the drainage issues. And I'm glad that you've taken the time to meet with the property owners. But from my standpoint, when I'm looking at this, because so if you change that piece right there, what do you do with the other property right there beside it? Well, eventually it's just a way to continue it. This is just a smaller version of the larger version that I didn't like then either, to be honest. So I'm having trouble getting on board with this one. I'm not sure that this is when we're looking at what is the best for the long-term plans for the town. And I know there's tax revenue here, but I'm not sure it's the best. And that's just my thoughts. I'll open it up to the rest of the commission to share their thoughts. Anybody?
I will say, Sarah, I agree with everything that you said. I may have missed it. I believe Cheryl brought up the point of maybe honoring some evening hours. Do we know if the potential business that would go into this spot would be able to honor those evening hours?
Yeah, that's sort of that's something that we have not breached with the particular user. And at this time, that's that's really, really hard for us to pinpoint and to commit to. And so I have to default to, and without really talking to my client in depth about that, I tend to say no on these types of projects. Those also become pretty big enforcement problems for communities. And so what I would look to do would be to try to be more thoughtful in our buffering and berming and landscaping rather than mitigate through restrictions on when a facility can or can't be used. So that I would have to decline to agree to something like that. And Mr. McCardwell would also like to address that as well if possible with further explanation.
Thank you. I actually appreciated the response to Lauren's question. I wanted to address Sarah's comments. And Sarah, I appreciate your comments. I think I would disagree a little bit that this is just a mini of what we were in for a couple months ago from a rezoning standpoint. We view this as it makes much more sense because the property is further west, it's smaller in nature, and the property that is immediately south of this, but yet still north of the creek, is already zoned industrial. So it's kind of a continuation of that. Additionally, we think and we agree that the property to the east, known as the Peabody property, that needs some more thought and some more interaction with various neighborhood groups and commission members, because that is closer to the residential that is to the east, Walker Farms. So I think it makes a lot of sense to come back at a later point and sit down and collectively try to determine what is the best master plan for that fairly large chunk of real estate per se. But it feels like to us, this 80-acre piece makes more sense for reasons I mentioned. Also, we're not accessing 300, so it'll keep significant traffic off of that road, and we'll be able to access our property via 500 or 575. So thank you.
You said there'd be access off 500. In the staff report, it appears just to be 570, or sorry, you said access off 575 or 500. Staff report, it appears just to be 500. So, but you're saying both? Or?
If you go ahead, Terry.
No, I misspoke. It wouldn't be off of 500. I think down the road, when we look at a more collective project, the idea would be that there would be an east-west road that would run from 500 to 575. Yep. Presuming that project would happen.
Commission, I would offer similar mixed feelings on this one. The last one was fairly easy for me, much the same way that Sarah has described. The northern, a light industrial or a primary ag to something else, those things make sense to me. But when we're going from the desired character of a residential, in particular here, we're not even talking about high density. If what really the question is the comprehensive plan accurate, or does it need revision? It's a hard thing to do on this on a project by project. The council will be considering this. Is that correct? Is there an item on the agenda for the council? And this is about our recommendation or not? Yes?
Yes, this is, I would recommend at least giving the council a recommendation. I would not recommend as plan commission with a rezone, your job is to review it first and then give a recommendation to council. I would recommend not sending a recommendation to them, but yes, we make the recommendation to them and then they have the final decision.
So Matt, just to answer that from the legal perspective, you have three, there's four choices really tonight. One would be to continue this if you feel like you need more information. Then the other three options are favorable recommendation, unfavorable recommendation, or you actually can pass it on to the council with no recommendation at all. And then the council gets to decide if they're up or down, and if then the way they vote, it can come back to you. If they approve it, it comes back to you for further consideration. So those are your three choices. And I'm with Brittany. Unless you feel like you need more information, better to make some decision tonight and let it go through the process than to just let it sit here and us continue to talk about it forever. But if you need more information, let's continue and get more information.
I don't feel like there's more information that would be useful.
No.
Decision.
Yeah.
I'll just echo the sentiment that's kind of been given, that it feels like it's getting a little too far north. And I too also feel that what we saw before, that this opens up the door for other requests for the whole or other properties that were already requested before. I think we just need to take a step back. And maybe, as we've discussed, it's time for the comprehensive plan to be reviewed in a much larger view that we can obtain, rather than do this now and have the impacts to the adjacent properties that were up before.
So is there any other information that anyone would like, any further discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I'll make a motion for unfavorable recommendation to town council.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Is there any further discussion? So then in reviewing what the options are, so the motion that's before us then is an unfavorable recommendation. So an aye vote would be an unfavorable recommendation, and a nay would be to disagree with that unfavorable recommendation.
Correct. So an aye is in favor of the unfavorable recommendation. A nay does not mean you're giving it favorable, just to mean if we don't get enough ayes, this motion fails, we'll have a new motion.
Yep. Okay, is there any further discussion?
All right, I will go ahead and call roll.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Doublestein,
Say nay.
Andrew McGee,
Aye.
Sarah Ford,
Aye.
Lauren Foley,
Aye.
Danny Powers,
Nay.
Steve Milstead.
Nay.
So we have a 3-3.
So the motion would then fail because there's not a majority in favor. So then we would move to see if there's another motion you want to take on this matter. If anybody wants to move either for favorable, which would be the option, or for no recommendation at all would be your two other options. And just so the process, what happens is if you forward this on with an unfavorable recommendation or no recommendation at all, then the process is the same. The council then reviews it anew. And they can decide whether to give it the thumbs up or the thumbs down. If they give it the thumbs up, it comes back to you for further review. If they give it the thumbs down, then it dies. So that would be the process. And for unfavorable or for no recommendation, the process is the same. It will come back to you.
And then I would like to make a motion to forward this on with no recommendation to the council.
Dude, I hate that. What does that mean? I mean, what does that mean? I mean, that's like saying.
It means I made a motion, so I think we have to see if there's a second, and then we can discuss it.
Okay.
So is there a second to Matt's motion?
This is a question for Jonathan. Do we have to come out of tonight with some kind of motion? I mean, is that ultimately we have to come out with something?
Well,
So we can't leave it just, with the vote as it was. It needs to come up with something that we can get enough eyes on. Is that correct?
yes, sort of. So the Plan Commission rules provide that if there's not enough votes one way or the other, then it gets put back on your agenda for the next meeting. I think that's what your rules say. So, and I'm looking at them here in a second. So basically, and this may be in part because, we have a deadlock because Dave joined a little bit late and don't know if he heard everything that was going on. And then we would just have this again in the future and have another vote on it. We wouldn't have to have a new petitioner presentation or anything unless you wanted additional information. But yeah, your rules say we have to have a majority vote one way or the other for something to happen. Otherwise, it just stays here kind of in limbo. And I know that the no recommendation feels like, well, we're not doing our job. But the reason that rule exists is for deadlocks like this, where you just can't agree, and it gets it kind of moving back through the process. I'm not saying that's what you should do. It's why that process exists. Totally up to the board what you want to do.
I haven't heard a second, so it sounds like that motion is dead.
Well, I mean, that changes things because if we have, it doesn't need to come back here. I don't think. I mean, does the board feel like it needs to come back to be discussed again? Then our only other,
I don't think so.
Then our only other option is to go with the no recommendation. I mean, that would be the next step, I believe, if I'm hearing that correctly, Mr. Hughes.
That's correct.
So in that case,
John, can you specify, I just want to be clear as you were explaining, did you say that if they send it forward with no recommendation and council would make a motion to approve, it comes back to Plan Commission? Is that what you said?
Correct. So it would come back to the Plan Commission. Now, rezones are legislative process. So ultimately, the council is going to have the final say. So, if we voted no on this, they could overturn our vote. It comes back to us for further consideration. But that's correct. If you give it an unfavorable recommendation, it comes back to you. Why is that? Well, there may be some commitments that we want to have included before we give it a thumbs up, et cetera. So that's the reason it comes back. But that's what will happen. It'll get approved. Now, you don't have to take action. If you do nothing and just let it sit, then it's approved as provided by the council. But that we can handle in the future. That's the process.
So I think my motion died. Is there any further discussion or any additional motions? Perhaps then, Sarah, my thinking on this is that I'm sufficiently torn enough that I don't feel like I can give it a thumbs up or thumbs down in the moment. And so because that process exists and the council has to make that decision for, whether, no matter what we say anyway, my thinking on it for myself is, well, let's see what the council thinks.
Just to close the loop, your rule, Article 4, Section 4 of your rules say if there's an indecisive vote, which is any vote where there's not a majority, then it's automatically redocketed for your next meeting. So that would be, if we don't have a vote tonight, that's what will happen, which is fine too. Totally up to the board.
Then in that case, Matt, if your motion's still out there, I'll second it.
I think you got to make a new one.
Oh,
I think that's right, because Matt said his motion failed, so I have to make the motion again.
I'll make a motion of no recommendation to the council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, Brittany?
Matt Doublestein,
Aye.
Andrew McGee,
Aye.
Sarah Ford,
Aye.
Lauren Foley,
Aye.
Danny Powers,
Aye.
Steve Milstead.
Aye.
All right, so that one passes. Okay, thank you all. I don't see any other business. There are no announcements listed. Brittany, do you have anything for us?
I do not.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we don't have to do roll on this one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Brittany, I'll be in touch tomorrow with how to docket that up to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.